Well, right underneath this house is actually a 1,000 square foot cellar that actually, the entrance is right here. And that would have served as a kind of a refrigerator of sorts back then, because it drops in temperature when you go down there. It's nice and cool, so they could have stored their produce down there. They also stored coal down there, because there were coal chutes leading down there where they were delivered from the back alleyway that they would burn to keep this house warm later on. Well, the courtyard that we're standing in today would have looked way different all the way back when the Sorrels were living here. And one of the biggest differences is because, as I already mentioned at the beginning of our tour, this building would not have been here. His original carriage house and slave quarters would actually be kind of in that corner beyond this brick wall here. Okay? So that would have been the original, and this part came in the 1860s when the second owner came in and he expanded onto it. So when the Sorrels were here, way more space back here. He also owned the property that this building sits on today. This is called a row house, and he actually builds it later on when he's living here in the 1850s for his growing family. All right, he's got a very big family, and quite a few members of which are adolescent young boys. Well, he's not a very patient man, Mr. Francis. And so he gets very fed up with his rowdy boys. He is so fed up, in fact, that he kicks them out of this house and tells them to go live next door where they can't bother him anymore. So as punishment, they get their own bachelor pad.
Yeah.
Oh, man, what punishment.
Exactly. Well, without this brick wall here separating the two properties today, there would have been, again, more courtyard space, a shared courtyard, much more room for a garden that would have been back here. This garden looks very similar to the one that we have today. It would have grown things like produce and also flowers. Now, flowers are going to be essential to the time period because of just how stinky it is back then. All right? Keep in mind, it's a city. Today, cities have a bad reputation for being kind of stinky, but in the 1800s, imagine, the streets are not paved, people throw trash out there, and carriages are being pulled by horses, which leave trails behind as well. Well, none of these buildings back then would have modern plumbing, and so they have a series of chamber pots, and those chamber pots have to be emptied into a privy. Well, you can imagine the aroma there, but on top of everything else, if you're just gathering in a square, you're surrounded by other people. Well, people don't bathe a whole lot back then either. All right, rich people like Francis and Matilda, the people who lived in this house, they were the 1%ers of the town, and they bathed about twice a week. Imagine everyone else, kind of whenever you can.
Yeah.
And they were living next to a barracks full of stinky soldiers. So flowers might be kind of important to make things like perfumes, and also just kind of carry around with you and mask the scent of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, instead of a full garden, we are actually standing on a whole bunch of these bricks. Excuse me, very unprofessional with me.
Oh, you're fine. You can type it if you need.
No, that was very unprofessional. Let me turn this off. All right. So these bricks that we're standing on are actually very unique to Savannah. They are called Savannah gray brick, and they're made of the Savannah River clays just north of us, between the time period of the original colony in 1733 and before the Civil War. Afterwards, we lose the ability to make these bricks. We're missing some sort of vital ingredient because it was passed down by word of mouth. Well, in addition to these being historically significant in that sense, you will also see on quite a few of them these indentations in individual bricks. What do those look like to you guys? What if I did this?
Oh, okay.
Fingerprints, absolutely. Now, these fingerprints were put there by the slaves working on these brick plantations, making these very bricks.
Wow.
So, what that means is that while we don't have good written history, like we mentioned upstairs, of these slaves, at least we have the work that they did that literally laid the foundation of our city to remember them by. All right?
That's pretty cool.
Very, very cool. So, unlike the ones on the floor here, the ones on the wall aren't quite as cool. They're your typical manufactured imported bricks. They're here because the architect, Charles Kluski, he really wanted a cheap building material. Well, he got it. And he laid it with a very fine mortar, and then he covered it all up with stucco, material that protects it from moisture damage. That way the bricks don't literally melt off the walls in this hot heat, right? Well, not only does it protect it, but it also allows the architect to then score it or line the stucco, making it look like a different sort of building material. What it looks like is now big blocks of stone. Well, you're going to have to import stone because we don't have very good stone here locally because we're in a swamp, right? Well, what that means is that you have just spent way more money on this house than is expected of you. But he's not going to tell people that underneath it's brick, right?
Right.
Now, the next thing he does is he paints it these crazy bright colors, the oranges, the reds, and the greens. Well, that is also a signal of wealth. It signifies the wealth spent here because the brighter your dyes, the brighter your colors, the more expensive your dyes are to make those paints. So everything that you see on this house, inside and out, is one big sign of wealth, of how wealthy Mr. Francis is. All right? That's the purpose of it. You guys have any questions?
No?
No.
No
Pretty
questions?
interesting.
All right. Well, we'll go right on inside.